Hey everyone! Today, we're jumping right into Bill C-12. This is a brand new law that's set to really reshape Canada's entire immigration and asylum system. You know, with global migration patterns shifting all the time, this is a major update to the rulebook, so let's dive in.
So, what's at the heart of all this? Well, it really boils down to strengthening the system in four fundamental ways. We're going to walk through each one so you get a really clear picture of what's changing and, just as importantly, why it matters.
And let's be super clear, this is official. The Strengthening Canada's Immigration System and Borders Act, we'll just call it Bill C-12 for short, it became law on March 26, 2026. So this isn't just a proposal being kicked around. These changes are actually happening.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the new rules for asylum eligibility. Then we'll look at how the whole process itself is being modernized. After that, we're going to cover new rules for sharing information, and finally, we'll get into the changes for managing immigration documents.
Okay, first up, asylum eligibility. This part of the law is a pretty big deal. It introduces some brand new timelines for making a claim, and they're really important to understand.
This slide breaks down two critical new timing rules. So on the left, you've got what we're calling the one-year clock. Basically, if someone waits more than a full year after entering Canada to make an asylum claim, their case just won't be sent to the Immigration and Refugee Board, or IRB. Then on the right, there's the 14-day window. Now this one's for people who enter Canada irregularly, which means outside of an official border crossing. They now have just 2 weeks to make their claim.
So, you might be wondering why these changes? Why these strict timelines? Well, according to the government, it's all about reducing pressure, closing loopholes, and deterring people from using asylum as a kind of shortcut to regular immigration. The main goal here is to manage the system more effectively.
But what about vulnerable people? That's a fair question. The law does include some key safeguards. For instance, unaccompanied minors won't be subject to a blanket rule. An officer is going to look at their specific situation. And anyone whose claim gets rejected because of these new time limits can still get what's called a pre-removal risk assessment. And this is absolutely crucial. It's what ensures Canada doesn't send someone back to a country where they could face persecution or real harm.
All right, let's move on to our second section. It's not just about who's eligible. Bill C-12 also aims to modernize the entire asylum process, with a huge focus on making it more efficient and just better managed overall.
So how are they going to do that? Well, it breaks down into three main steps. First, they're simplifying the application with easier online forms, getting rid of repetitive questions. Second, only schedule-ready, which basically means fully complete, claims will be sent to the IRB. The idea there is to cut down on backlogs. And third, new rules are coming in to speed up decisions for abandoned cases and for folks who choose to leave voluntarily.
And again, you can see a specific focus on supporting people who might be vulnerable. The new law makes it possible to appoint a representative for minors or for really anyone who's having trouble understanding the whole process. And this support is available right across the system, whether you're dealing with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada or the Canada Border Services Agency.
Okay, our third pillar is all about data. Bill C-12 gives the government new legal authority for sharing information internally. The whole point is to connect the dots between different departments to provide better service and improve collaboration.
So, what kind of info are we actually talking about? Well, it includes things like identity and status information, which can now be shared with provincial and territorial partners. It also lets different programs within the Immigration Department, that's IRCC, share data. So, for example, info from a permanent residence application could help process a citizenship application later on. And finally, it allows for sharing across different federal departments.
Of course, whenever you hear information sharing, the first thing that probably pops into your head is privacy, right? Well, the legislation has some pretty solid safeguards built in to address that. Information can only be shared with partners who are legally allowed to collect it in the first place, and it always requires a formal written agreement. Plus, any new internal use of personal data needs a formal privacy impact assessment.
And that brings us to our fourth and final section, new tools for managing immigration documents. This is all about giving the government new powers to act on a large scale, especially when they need to respond to unexpected crises.
The core of this new authority is pretty straightforward. It's the power to manage immigration documents, think visas, work permits, but in bulk. This means the government can cancel or suspend a whole bunch of documents at once, or even just pause accepting new applications if they decide it's in the public interest.
This table does a great job showing how these powers are balanced. For each power, you see the justification is public interest.
which could be anything from widespread fraud to a public health crisis. But look at the safeguards. Canceling documents in bulk? That requires approval from the governor and council. Pausing applications? That decision has to be published publicly. And suspending processing? That gets reported directly to Parliament. So these are high-level decisions with real transparency built in.
Now, it's just as important to understand the limits here, what these powers don't affect. And this is a big one. These authorities do not apply to asylum claims. And they don't give the government the power to change someone's actual status, like revoking permanent residency. This is strictly about managing the documents, not a person's legal status in the country.
So there you have it, 4 major changes from Bill C-12. We've got new asylum eligibility rules, a modernized process, better information sharing, and new tools for document management. According to the government, this is all designed to create a more efficient, sustainable, and well-managed immigration system for Canada.
You know, this legislation really is a significant shift, and it leaves us all with a final, really important question to think about. As the world keeps changing and global migration patterns continue to evolve, how will these new rules truly shape the future of immigration in Canada?